I'm resident of Colin with Jill Saints for YouTube, joined by my buddy Gordon Dymowski and my buddy Patrick McCray. We're here to discuss more Dark Shadows. We're picking episodes by random. I'm picking first, Patrick's going to pick next, and then Gordon will pick the next one. So my choice was episode 10, and for many reasons. Number one, it's the first time Burke Devlin steps foot in Collinwood ever since he was a little boy. By the end of this episode. Number two, our buddy Patrick McCray said, if you get past 10 episodes, you're hooked on Dark Shadows. This is the 10th episode.
I didn't necessarily mean these 10.
I know,
but I'll give it to you anyway.
I know, but this is the 10th episode, narrated by the lovely Alexander Moltke Eisels. Great job as always. She actually narrates a lot of the episodes in the beginning and throughout Dark Shadows. And I love how this starts. In the great house, David is. You see the camera. Then David's coming in. He's creeping in. He's looking through the drawing room doors. David Hennessy looks creepy as hell. And then you have the phone ringing, and he's running around. He's looking, and he's starting to go up the steps. He hears his aunt. You hear Joan Bennett's voice. Elizabeth says, "I'll get it, Miss Winters." And David hides. Here comes Elizabeth. I love how Joan Bennett looks and she sees David Hennessy's character, David Collins, hiding. And she picks up the phone and she's talking to Roger. And she tells Roger she's not going to keep Victoria prisoner or locked in her room. Roger's not too happy with Victoria because he saw her with Burke Devlin. It's really, really a fun episode. And you also get an interaction with Carolyn and Burke in Burke Devlin's hotel room. What did you guys think of this episode, Gordon?
Well, I thought that, and watching it, it's when you consider that it's like literally the end of the second week of Dark Shadows, it does a really good job of really setting up what's to come. Like, the whole Burke-Roger rivalry. I love the fact that Mitch Ryan, when he's playing Burke this first time out, he could have done the obvious, like, oh, he's friendly, there's no problem, but have that undercurrent of resentment in his voice. He doesn't do that. Mm. He's very friendly to Carolyn, and we all know that he's given her ginger ale. So, you know that like his intentions may not be so noble. I really like the fact that it also sells the idea that, oh, Patrick, you rogue, you. It also sells the fact that David is he's a very lonely kid in this house. Like he's got, he's dealing with a dad who wants to send him off to a sanitarium, an aunt who kind of seems like, yeah, she's okay, but, he's got like a cousin who is kind of going off and, gallivanting. But it really sells the idea that David is not, he's not happy, but at the end where he's telling Roger, oh yeah, I heard about Burke Devlin. I heard it when you and Mom were fighting. And this was before we figured out that she's a scary firebird creature. So, but I think it does a really good job in starting to kind of build, okay, here's what's going to be coming down the pike.
Yeah. Patrick?
It has all those things. It's Liz has a dream in this.
Yes.
And it very vaguely hints at the supernatural, with the mention of the widows or something. I just watched it and I can't remember. Which says something about my feelings on this part of the series. The thing that stands out most to me in this episode is that scene. And I like the robot also. The robot's cool. And Burke and the near booze, kind of the naughtiness, the intense sense of taboo that Carolyn brings with her. into visiting this hotel room. So all of that's great stuff. However, when I was watching the episode and there's that dream sequence, it really made me think back to when I did the 2012 watch through, where I really put as much of what was coming out of my mind as I could, but yet I couldn't. And I really thought this is such a great tease for where the show is going to go. No matter what you think, when you're watching that, if you don't know what's going to happen, no matter what you think is the most this show can dish out, it's about to do a lot more. And that portentousness is something really cool. And of course, Mitch Ryan owns this episode, and it's an episode that's full of poetic dialogue. We don't really give it credit for that, but what the original series lacked in Evan Hanley's mutilated face, kind of just as symbolic of the weirdness the show would later indulge in. This is not a world where Oberon and Haza are going to show up to play horseshoes, So it's yeah.
There's a scene in the drawing room between David and Elizabeth where David says about the tea set, and Elizabeth says, "Yo, you did break it," and he says, "No, they did," and he's implying the ghost.
Yeah.
Later on, you see Elizabeth in the drawing room. She's asleep in the chair, and she says, "Ghost? No, there's no ghost here." And then you see like Joan, Elizabeth opening her eyes, and you see David, and then she opens her eyes, and then she says, "David, why are you so dirty?" And this is where he removed the bleeder valve. This is before keep in mind, Burke Devlin is going to show up by the end of this episode. This is the next episode. By the end of the next episode, Roger's going to wreck his car. So David has already removed the bleeder valve. He doesn't show what's in his hand. He runs off. David is talking about Burke. He goes, "Is Burke Devlin not real?" And Elizabeth says, "No, he's very real, all too real." And then Elizabeth goes back to it, and she goes, "Now what's in your hand?" And he hides it behind his back. We don't even see it, and neither does she. And he runs out the room. And he's filthy. He's dirty. He says it's just a seashell, but we don't see what it is. We know what it is. It's a bleeder valve. But really, really good episode. You're right. Mitch Ryan does own this episode for all the right reasons. He's not, like Gordon touched upon, he's not playing the sinister part to Carolyn's face. He's doing it, but the audience knows exactly what he's doing.
He's enjoying what he's doing so much that it's more sinister than if he were snarling,
He's playing her for a fool in every way. He says, "Call me." He tells the operator to say, "Hey, call me in a half hour." And he treats that call like it's the business call from Venezuela, right in front of her. It's not, but she doesn't know it. He lays the paper on the couch, and she does call him upon, "Oh, you could have just left it there on purpose to throw me off." And great acting by both Nancy Barrett and Mitch Ryan. Great chemistry. And another great moment in this is just the lighting of the black and white episode, the lighting of Collinwood, the darkness of it. It really, really gives that creepy nostalgia horror feel.
Yes.
What's you guys' favorite scene in this episode?
I think the one where Jonathan Harris walks into the room with David behind the chair and the robot, and he goes, "Come with me, you insolent booby. Let's go and talk to Major West." I love that scene.
Really, Major West? Here I am, trapped outside Jupiter 2 like some sort of freak.
Never fear, Smith is here.
That stuff, Jewel. That's what we wanted to be watching in 1966. I guess my favorite scene. Wow. I like the when Carolyn comes in for a drink. I like that.
Yeah.
Jewel, I have to really come out of the closet on this one. No surprise for you. I don't like this part of the series. I don't consider it the same series. I call it Shadows on the Wall.
I know.
And I think it's a boring show that probably deserved to be canceled before they brought in a vampire. I'm sorry. I know that there are people who say you can't understand Dark Shadows without understanding and loving the first part and all of that. And I would say, well, tell that to all the people who watched the bloody thing for 25 years before those were seen, Now we take them for granted, but there are some good moments, but God, what a slog to get through to them. I don't find Vicki Winters to be a very compelling protagonist. Burke Devlin, Make Up Your Mind. I don't hate it, but as much as I love Dark Shadows, I really think of it as a separate show.
Yeah, I'm going to lean into my favorite scene. I think comes at the end when David confronts his father about Burke Devlin for a couple of reasons. I think because this is so early in the series, we don't know where this show is going, and we could easily say, we could be talking about how the next week is the final week, but the fact that he confronts him, you can see where at least one of the writers said, aha, we can start hitting that tone, that heightened tone. And it's something that you see later on in the series, which is that they manage not only to do it, but to do it at several points so that it's not build, climax, and credits. It's build, climax, build, another climax, build, another climax. And I think, I think up until Barnabas, the show's trying to figure out, okay, what exactly can we do?
Mm-hmm.
And they're bumping up against a thing where they're thinking conventional soap opera. When you shift to the Barnabas series, you've got not just the whole realistic vampire, but somebody on the writing staff must have been reading I Am Legend by Richard Matheson, especially when Julia comes in to try to cure him, because they're trying to give it this, kind of scientific veneer with the cells. But it's that heightened emotion. Whereas here it's like all, well, yeah, there's ghosts in the house. Oh, there may be not. The kid might be a little. They're setting up this rivalry between two male characters, and in fact, Devlin and I wish I could. It would be cool if it were deliberate foreshadowing. But Burke keeps telling Carolyn, "I am not the monster," whereas Roger actually is acting like a monster. I mean, it's 10 episodes in, they're not thinking that far ahead. They're actually thinking, okay, how do we stay on the air and how do we keep Dan happy?
Yeah. I think with Dark Shadows, now I know there's this whole Shadows on the Wall thing. I do see this all as one big thing, and here's why. When I chose this episode deliberately because when I just not that long ago, when you're on episode 1, and it's not just some kid spouting off that there's ghosts in the house. David, yes, does live at Collinwood. Okay. Burke, who was Roger's friend at one point, was in Collinwood, and he says he used to go looking for ghosts, and he says they're there. He's not talking about dirty secrets. I think he's being literal. And with
okay.
with Maggie, who's not a Collins, is pretty much implying that the house is haunted. You could say that's just town gossip, and you'd be right. Now, with enough gossip and enough rumor and innuendo, sometimes there's truth behind it. We learned that in 1841. We're going to eventually learn that here with Dark Shadows, that yes, Collinwood is haunted. And is, with Victoria is here to, obviously teach David, but Victoria is also a doubting Thomas. She doesn't believe in ghosts. She doesn't believe in the supernatural. This is a woman who has no reason to believe in those things. And she doesn't. Now, she gets proven wrong. She eventually starts believing in them. When you're pretty much talking to the ghost of Josette in a car ride with a lawyer, yeah, you're a believer. You're not a doubter anymore. And with this episode, though you don't get a ghost, and we don't actually get a ghost sighting, we get the next best thing. We get more suggestion. And we not only get suggestion, we get suggestion from two people, two residents of Collinwood, David and Elizabeth. And it's not just David, it's Elizabeth being asleep and going, no, there's no ghost. It lets you know that Elizabeth, maybe in the back of her mind, believes that this house is indeed haunted and that there are ghosts that walk these halls.
Okay. Those I support the passion with which you make many of those assertions. I personally, I do not feel that. I think that this has been a period where the ghosts have been quiet for a long time. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons is that Roger and Elizabeth, honestly, do not act like people who are living in a haunted house or who have grown up with that. I don't feel that they are. Roger is too much of the real world. He's too dismissive when we first meet him of the mention of the supernatural, and I don't think that's just denial. And Liz, I feel the same way. I don't think Liz would raise her daughter in an environment like that. I think Liz would have gotten out, and I think Roger would have gotten out also, because it's just two of them. And that's it. And turn the place into a museum. The other thing, the reason why I think they act like they haven't really grown up in a haunted house is that I haven't done the count for Elizabeth. However, after the return from 1897, okay, in 1897, I really see as the breaking point where Roger and Elizabeth have to concede we're living in a haunted house. Mm-hmm. Okay, when Roger screams or he bellows or intones, "We'll be back, we'll be back," that's a different show. Now, I could do the count right now, but I really don't have the time. However, I'm looking at the number of episodes that Liz was in, and I think she was probably in about 20 or 25 after 1897. Roger, do you know how many episodes Roger is in after 1897? 14. He is only in 14 more episodes. He spends most of his time away from the house. Why does he spend most of his time away from the house? Because Quentin just almost killed his son. And to me, it suggests that, Roger, either there is something keeping David in the house or letting Roger keep David in the house because he came too close to losing him. Yeah. Or he had some sort of really ugly come to Jesus meeting with himself, where he realized David is a vulnerability, and he could actually lure me back into the house where I could die. So I'm going to cultivate a greater distance from the lad until we can get him sent off to Alaskan Military Academy, and I can leave.
Yeah, my son's.
Yeah, because after 1897, not only is Roger away, but David's still there.
Yeah, David is still
there. If my kid were about to be taken over by a malevolent spirit, I don't care how awesome his mutton chops are, I'd be pulling my kid out of there and taking them with me.
Yeah. Well, okay. In the house is dormant, right? They don't talk about that they're living in a haunted house.
They talk about the widows, but then the widows vanish at a certain point.
Right. The widows are a separate thing from the actual house, though. They're a part of Widow's Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but when Victoria steps into the house and it goes further along, what starts to happen? Things become less dormant. You've talked about it takes an outsider. Maybe it took an outsider to wake up the ghost.
That's fully possible. Yeah, I'm just saying that I don't think they were awake while Roger and Liz were kids, because during the Gerard business, or certainly during the Quentin business, Roger and Elizabeth would have had a moment saying, you know what, we dealt with this when we were kids, but this is nothing like we dealt with when we were kids.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
By the way, my favorite scene in this episode is when Elizabeth and Roger are arguing, and then Roger finds out David's been hiding the whole time, and he says, stand up. Great scene.
It is a great scene.
A lot of great scenes in this episode. What do you guys want to add about this episode? Anything?
Okay, what can I add about this episode? I think that the one thing, and it's kind of hard to judge because it's so early in the run. Like if this were episode 110, we'd have enough to kind of judge it fairly. And I also have to come clean is that the pre-Barnabas run, I think there's some really good moments that when it starts to build steam towards the latter half, leading into it. But I kind of like to think of this as like a good comparison would be the show The Expanse. If you watch its first season, it's basically a mystery about person is investigating a missing woman, and it's set on Mars in the future. And a lot of people don't like it. But when you get to series 2, it turns into a full-on space opera, and it goes into a great exploration of politics and culture, and it builds out each season. So each season is kind of an arc. And so it's easier for me with this particular era, the first 210 episodes, to see it as the shakedown cruise for Dark Shadows. Because once you get Barnabas in, it cranks up the storytelling because they don't have to rely on the tropes of, oh, Patrick dropped something. Is that a ghost? Or is he clumsy? Oh, wait, Roger says, hey, you can't be an alcoholic with the first drink. You don't have to worry about being cliche because once Barnabas comes in, you're then going, okay, how do we avoid the obvious cliches? And that leads to, okay, how do we do time travel? How do we do this? How do we keep moving forward?
Mm-hmm. I think in this episode too, when you look at it for what it is, it's building towards the next episode, which is building toward your first real mystery, if you will. Though we know David's dirty, we're going to blame Burke for Roger. They're going to blame Burke for Roger's car wreck. At least Roger is, because by the end of the next episode, Burke does invite Roger to the Blue Whale. And when he finds out, well, he's like, you know damn well that my sister would never sell the house. Come on. You didn't really want that. It's the writers are doing a really good job setting up the dominoes to come and the dominoes to connect and fall.
Yeah. I would agree. And your enjoyment of that is entirely predicated on how much you like that show. You know? Yeah. And if you, but I maintain it's not the same show.
I respect
and I will say that I've never seen an episode that required the presence of Craig Slocum.
Strange you should mention that. Because Slocum is coming at you.
Oh.
He said, I'm out.
Good night, folks.
631.
That's the episode you're picking?
That is the episode I am picking.
Okay,
and it is a Slocum special.
So are we good for Sunday, Gordon? You good Sunday night?
Yeah, I'm good Sunday night.
Okay, Sunday night at 11, guys.
Harry Johnson will rise.
600 and
don't let your John. Oh, never mind.
No, 600 and what is it?
631.
31. Okay.
Yeah, it's one better than 630, but one less than 632.
Now I'll give you a heads up on some things. There will be references. There will be references to the author of Blade Runner. There will be references to Charlton Heston's co-star in The Crucifer of Blood, and Khartoum, the same actor, one of his frequent co-stars. So there will be references to both of those.
Speaking of Philip K. Dick,
but I do have a question. Will it have a scene involving a clown punching a bear?
In a better world. In a better world.
Speaking of Philip K. Dick, I'm convinced Philip K. Dick would have hated the Blade Runner sequel. I'm convinced.
Really? Why?
Yeah. Because Philip K. Dick, before he died, he was very complimentary of David Peoples. He said David Peoples saved the Blade Runner script, the first movie. Hampton Fancher, who was not a good actor, and David Peoples, who didn't return for the sequel. David Peoples, the guy who saved the script the first time.
Sure.
So, by the way, he did see an effects reel, Philip K. Dick of Blade Runner, and it blew his goddamn mind.
Really?
Yes. So there's that. Gentlemen, see you Sunday night, 6:31. I will see you guys. But first of all, thank you both for joining me.
Thank you for putting up with me.
No. Look, I enjoy opinions. I love you guys. I love listening to you guys give your thoughts on Dark Shadows. We're going to come back and pick more episodes. This is going to be fun. That's what this is for. That's what this channel's for, to have fun talking Dark Shadows.
And for those who are watching, when you know the episode at the end, you go watch it on Tubi and you can join in the fun in the chat.
Absolutely. Leave a comment. Tell us what you thought about the episode 10. Good, bad, and different. What was your favorite scene, obviously? Links to Gordon Dymowski's Amazon page is going to be in the description box. Links to the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound is going to be in the description box. Guys, you have a beautiful, beautiful Friday night.
Sniff wisely.
You too. Good night, all.
Good night.